Do you remember when America glowed, when polyester suits shimmered under disco lights and the world seemed brighter with every beat? It was the 1970s, a decade that dared to dream in color, where even a simple pet rock could make a man a millionaire, and gas lines stretched for miles as the nation learned patience the hard way. From backyard cookouts filled with laughter to the rhythm of disco that refused to die, this was the decade that defined what it meant to live, love, and laugh out loud. So hit like, subscribe, and come with us as we rewind America's most unforgettable years. 1. Polyester suits and butterfly collars. Picture this, the disco lights of the 1970s casting golden reflections on a sea of polyester. Back then, the American dream shimmered literally. Men stepped onto dance floors wearing glistening suits that clung to the body like plastic armor, their collars stretching wide enough to take flight. You could almost hear the swish of the fabric and the faint crackle of static as couples moved to the Bee Gees beneath mirrored ball. Polyester wasn't just fashion, it was a declaration of confidence. These suits promised modernity, wrinkle-resistant, easy to wash, ready for the fast-paced new decade. For working men and weekend dancers alike, they symbolized a hope that life could be smooth, glossy, and always camera-ready. But soon America's love affair with synthetic shine began to fade. Natural fabrics returned, disco dimmed, and those oversized collars became museum relics of a louder age. Still, when we look back, there's warmth in that glow, because those who wore polyester weren't chasing trends. They were chasing joy, optimism, and a sense of belonging on the dance floor. For many Americans, those shimmering suits weren't just clothes. They were freedom stitched into fabric. 2. Bell-bottoms and bicycle mishaps. Imagine a bright suburban afternoon in the 1970s, the sun-high radios playing Fleetwood Mac and kids racing down quiet streets on their bicycles. Their flared jeans, those famous bell-bottoms, fluttered wildly with each pedal. They were the ultimate badge of cool, the fashion that said you were part of something youthful and free. But that freedom came with a twist of comedy and sometimes pain. One wrong move and those wide hems would slip straight into the greasy bike chain, yanking the rider to a stop. A torn pant leg, a scraped knee, and a burst of laughter from friends, that was the real soundtrack of the decade. Bell-bottoms weren't just clothing, they were rebellion sewn into denim. They said, "I won't be boxed in." They made every walk feel like a runway and every school hallway a stage. Yet, as the decade closed, practical minds took over. Jeans, narrowed styles, simplified, and the dreamlike flow of fabric disappeared into memory. Still, whenever someone hears the hum of a bike chain or sees an old photo of frayed jeans caught midair, it sparks that same grin. Because the 1970s taught us that even fashion's small disasters could turn into the fondest stories of growing up American. 3. Men's unbuttoned shirts and the chest hair trend. Step inside a smoky nightclub in the mid-1970s. The music thumps, lights shimmer off, mirrored balls, and men move confidently through the crowd, shirts half unbuttoned, gold chains gleaming against a patch of chest hair. It wasn't arrogance, it was liberation. After decades of button collars and rigid suits, American men were finally letting themselves breathe, literally and symbolically. That casual exposure said, "I'm comfortable in my own skin." This look became the signature of masculinity in that decade. Movie stars like Burt Reynolds and John Travolta turned it into a symbol of swagger and charm. Men who worked 9 to 5 during the week could transform into disco kings by Saturday night simply by undoing a few buttons. It was the American dream, with a few more chest curls on display. But by the 80s, the mood shifted. Clean shaves and tight collars returned, and chest hair became something to hide, wax, or joke about. Yet that brief era remains iconic, a time when confidence was measured not by wealth, but by how boldly you lived. It reminds us that style, like freedom, is cyclical, and the courage to be yourself never goes out of fashion. 4. Mood rings and the science of emotion. In an America newly obsessed with self-expression, the mood ring became a tiny glowing oracle. Picture a teenager in 1975 staring at a ring that shifts from blue to green to amber, convinced it's whispering secrets about their soul. It was part science, part magic. The ring's liquid crystals changed color with body temperature, but for millions it felt like emotion made visible, your feelings literally shining on your hand. At school cafeterias and backyard parties, kids compared colors like fortunes. Blue means calm, one would say. Black means you're mad at me. The mood ring blended chemistry with curiosity, reminding Americans that wonder could live in small, silly things. It was cheap, charming, and deeply human proof that people longed to understand themselves. As decades passed, the fad faded into nostalgia. Smartwatches replaced mystery with data, and feelings became graphs instead of colors. Still, there's something beautiful about that naive belief that a tiny ring could decode the heart. The 1970s weren't about accuracy, they were about imagination. And that's why mood rings still glow in our collective memory symbols of a nation's childlike curiosity. 5. Shag carpets and avocado green dreams. Step into a living room in the heart of the 1970s. The first thing you notice isn't the TV or the furniture, it's the carpet. Thick, soft, and wild like a field of moss, the shag carpet ruled American homes. Beneath your toes, it felt luxurious, cozy, almost alive. The walls were painted in harvest gold, and the kitchen shimmered in avocado green. Every color shouted warmth, comfort, and optimism. These weren't random choices. They reflected a country chasing coziness after turbulent years. The world outside was complicated, but inside the home became a sanctuary of texture and color. Kids sprawled on shag rugs to watch cartoons. Parents hosted bridge nights, surrounded by earth tones and laughter. Yet beauty had its price. Those same fibers trapped dust, crumbs, and secrets from decades past. By the 80s, Americans traded in their fuzzy floors for clean lines and hardwood. But for anyone who lived through that era, the memory remains tactile. The smell of carpet cleaner, the sound of a vacuum struggling through thick fibers, the way sunlight turned green, walls golden. The 1970s weren't sterile. They were soft, messy, and full of life. 6. Macrame owls and homemade art. Every home in the 1970s had a story hanging on its wall, literally. Knotted by hand, strand by strand, macrame decorations became the ultimate expression of creativity. Housewives and young dreamers alike transformed simple rope into masterpieces, plant holders, hanging shelves, and the famous owl with wooden bead eyes. It wasn't just decoration, it was pride. It said, "I made this." In an age before social media, Americans shared their craft the old-fashioned way through living rooms, church fairs, and family gatherings. Every knot carried patience and care, often tied during quiet evenings when the radio hummed softly in the background. As factories grew and ready-made goods filled stores, macrame slowly unraveled. But its spirit lives on in the revival of handmade culture today. Modern creators chasing authenticity have rediscovered what the 1970s already knew, that making something with your hands connects you to life in a way no algorithm can. If this nostalgic journey warms your heart, hit like and subscribe for more forgotten American stories, each one a knot in the tapestry of who we were. 7. The pet rock phenomenon. Only in America could a rock become a millionaire. In 1975, advertising man Gary Dahl turned a simple stone into a national craze. Packaged in a tiny cardboard box with air holes and a humorous care manual, the pet rock promised companionship with zero effort. People lined up to buy what was essentially a joke. But that's exactly why it worked. The pet rock was absurd, funny, and a little genius, a wink at consumer culture, and a mirror of American optimism. For $3.95, you could laugh at life's seriousness and own something completely useless, yet oddly comforting. In less than 2 years, Dahl sold over 1 million of them, making more than a fortune. He made history. The fad faded quickly, but its meaning didn't. It revealed something deeply American, our ability to find joy even in nonsense. In a decade searching for balance between idealism and absurdity, a small rock reminded us to laugh at ourselves. Sometimes the silliest ideas tell the smartest truths. 8. The metric system that never stuck. In 1975, President Gerald Ford signed the Metric Conversion Act, hoping to modernize America. Road signs began showing kilometers and milk jugs proudly listed liters. The rest of the world measured in tens, but Americans clung to inches, miles, and pounds like family heirloom. Why? Because measurement wasn't just math, it was identity. The United States had built its railroads, highways, and recipes on imperial numbers. Switching felt like rewriting its story. The attempt failed spectacularly. Students groaned, teachers sighed, and by the late 70s, the experiment quietly vanished. Today, America still measures in its own rhythm, stubbornly unique. Some call it resistance to change, others call it pride. Either way, the metric moment became a humorous reminder that not every modernization can override emotion. The 1970s were full of change, but they also proved that tradition, even when irrational, has its own quiet gravity. It's funny now, but in that small act of defiance, you can see a nation wrestling with progress and nostalgia caught between the world it built and the world it feared losing. 9. The rise and fall of disco, the pulse of the 1970s, beat to a mirror ball. Disco wasn't just music, it was movement, color, and liberation. From New York clubs to small-town bars, America danced like never before. Under spinning lights, everyone was equal. Black, white, gay, straight, rich, poor. The rhythm united them all. Songs like "Stayin' Alive" and "I Will Survive" became anthems of resilience. For one shining moment, life felt endless. But by 1979, the backlash hit hard. Disco Demolition Night in Chicago saw thousands destroy records in protest, turning joy into chaos. What began as music of inclusion was mocked as excess. Yet the glitter never truly died. Its legacy lives in pop dance and the spirit of fearless self-expression. Disco showed that sometimes joy itself can be revolutionary and that rhythm could break more barriers than any speech. Looking back, the disco ball still spins in our collective memory, a reminder that every era shines brightest right before the lights go out. 10. Saturday Night Live America laughs at itself. On an October night in 1975, a new kind of television was born, Saturday Night Live. It wasn't polished or predictable. It was raw, live, and revolutionary. Comedians like John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and Gilda Radner broke every rule on air. They mocked politicians, celebrities, and even the show itself, and America couldn't look away. SNL captured the chaos of its time post-Vietnam: cynicism, political mistrust, cultural rebellion. Each sketch felt like a mirror held up to a country learning to laugh through its pain. It wasn't just entertainment, it was catharsis. Watching it live became a national ritual, a shared experience in an age before replays or smartphones. Decades later, the show still runs, but the magic of that first season remains unmatched, a spark of daring humor that said, we can face our flaws and still laugh. In a decade filled with glitter oil crises and social change, Saturday Night Live proved that laughter might just be the most honest form of history America ever wrote. 11. The CB radio boom. Long before cell phones, truckers and travelers had their own social network, the CB radio. In the mid-1970s, these little boxes turned highways into chat rooms. Drivers gave each other nicknames, shared traffic tips, and built a brotherhood on the open road. The air buzzed with code words like breaker 1 to 9 and 10 to 4, good buddy. It was more than a fad, it was connection in motion. For the lonely or restless, CB radios made America feel smaller, kinder. Songs like Convoy even made the airwaves celebrating a new kind of folk hero, the everyday driver. When technology advanced, the chatter faded, but the memory stuck. The CB era captured something pure about the American spirit, the need to communicate, to belong, and to make even the longest road feel like home. 12. The gas crisis, when the pumps ran dry. In 1973, America hit the brakes. Gas shortages left drivers waiting in endless lines, sometimes overnight, just for a few gallons. Green flags at stations meant fuel was available. Red flags meant empty tanks. Tempers flared, patience thinned, and the smell of gasoline became the scent of frustration. The crisis wasn't just about oil, it was about vulnerability. A nation built on mobility suddenly had to slow down. Families planned trips around ration fuel, and compact cars became symbols of survival. The sight of "sorry, no gas" signs remains burned into memory. But it also united people in resilience. Neighbors shared rides, communities adapted, and America learned that convenience could vanish overnight. The gas lines eventually disappeared, but the lesson stayed: independence, both personal and national, is never guaranteed. The 1970s taught us that even a superpower can stall, and sometimes slowing down is how history catches up. 13. Backyard family cookouts every summer weekend in the 1970s smelled like charcoal and freedom. The backyard barbecue wasn't just a meal, it was an American ritual. Fathers flipped burgers on sizzling grills while mothers laid out potato salad and sweet tea. Kids chased fireflies as music drifted from a radio on the porch. No one worried about fancy plating or diets. It was about being together, sharing stories, and letting laughter fill the air. Even uninvited neighbors were welcome, drawn by the scent of smoky ribs. The backyard became a sanctuary, a patch of grass where love, simplicity, and community lived side by side. Today, barbecue still exists, but something about those days feels warmer. Maybe it was the slower pace or the way people truly looked each other in the eye. The 1970s cookout was proof that happiness could be homemade, and it didn't need more than sunshine, family, and a little smoke in the air. 14. Playing vinyl records together. Long before playlists and algorithms, music was a shared ritual. In a 1970s living room, the record player was the family altar. Someone carefully lifted the needle, a faint crackle filled the air, and the room fell silent as the music began. Friends passed album covers around like sacred texts: Fleetwood Mac, Elton John, the Eagles, each one a story pressed in wax. Listening wasn't background noise, it was communion. Every scratch, every pop was part of the experience. When a favorite song came on the radio, everyone rushed to record it onto cassette, holding their breath so no one would ruin the take. Those moments weren't about perfection, they were about connection. Today's streaming may give us every song instantly, but it can't recreate that anticipation, that shared stillness. The 1970s taught America to listen, not just with ears, but with heart, and to treat music as the thread that wove families and generations together. 15. Billie Jean King and the Battle of the Sexes, 1973. A packed arena, 90 million viewers worldwide. On one side stood Billie Jean King, young, fierce, and unyielding. On the other, Bobby Riggs, a self-proclaimed male champion who mocked women's sports. Their tennis match wasn't just a game, it was history's turning point. When King won in straight sets, the crowd erupted. It wasn't just a victory for her, it was a triumph for every woman told she couldn't compete, couldn't lead, couldn't win. In that moment, sport became politics, courage became a weapon, and the ball that crossed the net carried the weight of a movement. King's victory cracked open conversations that reshaped workplaces, classrooms, and homes. It showed a generation that equality wasn't an idea, it was something you could fight for on live television. Her story still echoes today, a reminder that sometimes a racket and a little courage can change an entire nation's game. 16. Jim Fixx and the running craze. In 1977, a middle-aged writer named Jim Fixx laced up his sneakers and unknowingly changed America's relationship with exercise. Before him, running was something athletes did, never ordinary people. But Fixx's book, The Complete Book of Running, turned jogging into a national obsession. Suddenly, parks and sidewalks filled with people in short shorts, headbands, and determination. They weren't just chasing fitness, they were chasing freedom. Running became a symbol of renewal after years of cultural turmoil. For many, it was meditation in motion, a way to breathe again after the chaos of the 60s. Fixx's clean, optimistic image inspired millions to believe they could rewrite their own health stories 1 mile at a time. Tragically, Fixx died of a heart attack while running at age 52. Critics called it irony, admirers called it devotion. Either way, his legacy endures. He made America move not just its body, but its spirit. And in every modern runner pounding the pavement, there's still an echo of 1977 sweat, solitude, and the simple belief that progress begins with one small step. 17. The Ford Pinto and the price of speed. The early 1970s promised compact, affordable cars for every family. The Ford Pinto seemed perfect, small, sleek, and economical. But behind its cheerful design hid a deadly flaw. Engineers had placed the gas tank dangerously close to the rear bumper. A minor collision could trigger an explosion. And it did. When the truth surfaced that the company allegedly calculated the cost of lawsuits cheaper than fixing the defect, America was outraged. The Pinto became a symbol of corporate greed and moral compromise. More than 20 lives were lost and countless more shaken by fear. The scandal forced a national reckoning. Safety standards toughened, consumer advocacy grew, and trust in big business took a hit that would last decades. Yet the Pinto's story also reflected a broader truth about the era America's pursuit of innovation sometimes raced faster than its conscience. Today, the Pinto stands as a cautionary tale, parked in history's memory, proof that progress without accountability can cost more than any company can pay. 18. The CB radio revolution. Long before smartphones and social media, Americans found their own way to stay connected on the open road, the CB radio. In the mid-1970s, truckers, travelers, and dreamers across the country adopted this gadget like wildfire. Breaker 1 to 9 they'd call, and strangers became friends through the static hum of shared highways. The CB culture gave rise to nicknames, slang, and songs like Convoy, turning everyday drivers into folk heroes. It wasn't just about chatting, it was about belonging. In a time of political scandals and economic stress, CB radios created a sense of community that stretched coast to coast. Families installed them in station wagons using handles like Mama Bear and Roadrunner. For a few years, the airwaves buzzed with laughter, jokes, and road reports. Then technology advanced and the chatter faded. But that brief moment captured the heart of America, ordinary people talking, helping, and sharing stories beneath endless skies. Even now, a 10 to 4 good buddy feels like an echo from a friend on a road that never ends. 19. The metric system that never stuck revisited. When President Gerald Ford signed the Metric Conversion Act in 1975, it seemed inevitable that America would finally align with the world. Road signs flashed kilometers, school books taught liters, and even soda cans carried dual labels. Yet within a few years, the idea vanished. The failure wasn't about math, it was about identity. Americans saw the imperial system as part of who they were. Miles, pounds, and inches felt like home. Switching felt like surrender. The metric moment became a national punchline, a symbol of stubborn pride and cultural independence. Decades later, the United States remains one of the few nations still resisting the metric tide. What some call outdated, others call authentic. It's a small rebellion that says we measure our own way. The story of the metric misfire isn't just about units, it's about unity. It shows that even progress must speak the language of the people or risk being lost in translation. 20. The energy crisis America runs on empty. Picture the gas lines of 1973 cars snaking for blocks, tempers flaring, and signs reading "No gas today." The oil embargo had struck, and the world's most powerful nation found itself suddenly powerless. For the first time, Americans realized their dependence on something beyond their borders. Families canceled road trips. Gas stations rationed fuel. The once carefree act of driving became an anxious gamble. Television showed presidents urging conservation, thermostats dropped, and bicycles made a comeback. It was a test of patience and adaptability. Yet hardship, sparked innovation. Small, fuel-efficient cars from Japan gained popularity. Solar energy entered public conversation. The crisis humbled America, but also redefined it, teaching a new generation that abundance could disappear overnight. The sound of idling engines and the smell of gasoline still linger in memory, a reminder that comfort is never guaranteed. The energy crisis wasn't just about oil, it was about awakening. Archie, avocado kitchens and the color of comfort. Step into an American kitchen in 1974 and you'll find a palette that defined the decade: avocado, green appliances, harvest gold walls, and copper brown countertops. These colors weren't random. They reflected a yearning for warmth, nature, and stability after the social storms of the 60s. The fridge, the oven, even the blender came in the same earthy tones. Matching sets ruled the home, a symbol of order and harmony in a world that felt uncertain. Housewives hosted coffee mornings surrounded by cheerful hues that made every space feel cozy and alive. By the mid-'80s, those shades faded, replaced by sterile whites and steel grays. But the memory of those colorful kitchens remains comforting. They were the heart of the home, a place where families laughed, argued, and lived fully. When we see a vintage avocado appliance today, it's not just decor, it's nostalgia for an era that believed joy could be baked right into the color of the walls. 22. The birth of the microwave generation. In 1971, the first home microwaves hit American kitchens, and nothing about cooking was ever the same. Suddenly, dinner wasn't an hour-long ritual, it was a minute-long miracle. Families could heat leftovers in seconds, and working parents embraced the convenience like magic. Commercials promised a futuristic lifestyle, fast, efficient, and effortless. Microwave cookbooks appeared filled with recipes that often failed but fascinated. It was progress wrapped in a metal box. Yet beneath the excitement was a quiet shift. Meals became faster, but family time grew shorter. The microwave symbolized modern America's trade-off: comfort over connection, speed over savoring. Today, it's hard to imagine life without it. But the first ding of those early microwaves still echoes as a sign of a nation falling in love with efficiency and beginning to redefine what home-cooked really meant. 23. Color TVs and the golden glow of togetherness. When color television finally became affordable in the early 1970s, families gathered like worshipers before its bright glow. For the first time, America could see its stories: the green of baseball fields, the glitter of disco stages, the crimson of evening news logos. The living room became the nation's theater. Parents and kids watched Happy Days and the Brady Bunch together, laughing and learning what normal looked like. Advertisers capitalized on it, and suddenly products and politics alike became performances in color. It was more than technology, it was connection. For a generation growing up in turmoil, those shared viewing hours offered comfort. By the end of the decade, black and white sets looked ancient, and the color screen became the new heart. The warm hum of the TV and the glow on the faces watching it remind us, before screens divided us, they once brought us together. 24. Arcade machines and the first gamers. Long before consoles ruled living rooms, the 1970s gave birth to a new kind of fun: the arcade. In smoky corners of pizza parlors and shopping malls, blinking machines invited kids to drop in quarters and chase glowing pixels across the screen. Games like Pong and Space Invaders sparked a cultural revolution. They weren't just games, they were windows into the digital future. Teenagers competed for high scores, friendships formed over joysticks, and America found a new obsession: interactive play. Arcades became safe havens for youth, a mix of noise, lights, and imagination. And though parents grumbled about wasted money, those machines laid the foundation for a billion-dollar industry and a new kind of storytelling. Every beep and flash from those early games whispered of what was to come: a future where humans would talk to machines and fun would no longer need a ball or field. 25. Disposable cameras and the American snapshot. Before smartphones, memories came in rolls of film. In the late 1970s, the disposable camera changed everything. Simple, cheap, and portable, it let ordinary people capture life as it happened. Family picnics, beach days, high school dances. You couldn't preview, edit, or delete. You just clicked and hoped. The magic came days later when the photos returned from the lab, blurry, overexposed, imperfect, yet precious. These snapshots told real stories, unfiltered and alive. They froze laughter mid-breath and accidents mid-fall. They were honest, messy mirrors of life before perfection became a requirement. When we scroll through endless digital images today, we rarely feel what those old photos carried: the surprise, the warmth, the imperfection. The disposable camera taught America that memories aren't meant to be flawless, they're meant to be felt. 26. Watergate and the crisis of trust. In the early 1970s, America faced a reckoning unlike any before, not on the battlefield, but in the Oval Office. The Watergate scandal began as a simple break-in at the Democratic headquarters, but what unraveled afterward shook the foundation of the nation. Hidden tapes, secret meetings, and denials from the highest seat of power painted a portrait of betrayal that ordinary citizens struggled to believe. For a country raised on ideals of honesty and democracy, the revelation felt personal. Each newspaper headline chipped away at the innocence of post-war America. Neighbors debated politics over morning coffee, talk shows buzzed with disbelief, and a generation of Americans learned that heroes could lie. When President Richard Nixon resigned in 1974, the country exhaled with both relief and sadness. It was the end of an era, the moment when blind trust gave way to questioning authority. But from that fracture came a new kind of strength. Americans demanded transparency, and journalism rose as the nation's conscience. Watergate wasn't just a scandal, it was a mirror showing America both its flaws and its resilience. It reminded the world that even in failure, democracy's greatest power lies in its ability to correct itself. 27. Vietnam's final years on American television. By the early 1970s, the Vietnam War was no longer a distant conflict. It was dinner table viewing. For the first time, Americans saw war unfold live, beamed straight into their living rooms. Helicopters slicing through jungles, soldiers trudging through mud, and haunting images of loss changed how the nation perceived itself. Each night, anchormen like Walter Cronkite narrated a war without glory. The grainy footage broke the spell of patriotic illusion, and families sat in silence, unsure what to believe. The distance between government statements and what people saw on screen grew wider every day. When the last U.S. troops left in 1975, America was exhausted, physically, morally, and emotionally. Veterans returned to a nation that didn't know how to welcome them home. The war had not only divided politics, but also hearts. Yet the Vietnam coverage marked a turning point in modern history, the rise of media as a moral force. It taught Americans that truth is often uncomfortable, and that sometimes seeing is the first step toward understanding. 28. The women's liberation movement and equal rights. The 1970s roared with a new kind of power, the voices of women demanding equality. From office floors to college campuses, women marched, shouted, and organized for the Equal Rights Amendment. They fought for fair pay, access to education, and the right to decide their own futures. Magazines featured Gloria Steinem's fearless gaze. Protest signs filled streets from New York to Los Angeles. Housewives joined, students and secretaries stood beside professors. It wasn't just a movement, it was a redefinition of what it meant to be American. For generations, women had been told to stay quiet, to serve, to smile. But in the 70s, they began to rewrite the script. The battle wasn't easy. The ERA ultimately failed to pass, but the cultural victory was undeniable. Boardrooms opened, laws changed, and young girls grew up believing they could be anything. The women's liberation movement left more than slogans. It left courage. And though equality remains a work in progress, those who marched in the 70s proved that freedom isn't given. It's demanded, fought for, and earned. 29. Earth Day and the birth of environmental awareness. On April 22, 1970, million Americans poured into the streets, not for protest, but for the planet. The first Earth Day united students, scientists, farmers, and families under one truth: the Earth was suffering and humans were responsible. Smog-choked cities, rivers caught fire, and pollution had become a way of life. Yet something shifted that day. For the first time, Americans saw the environment not as endless, but as fragile. Children planted trees, parents signed petitions, and television carried the message nationwide. From that movement came lasting change, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Air and Water Acts. The image of people holding handmade signs that read, "There is no planet B," became a timeless call to conscience. Earth Day reminded America that progress without care leads to decay. It was a moment of humility and hope, a realization that patriotism could mean protecting not just the flag, but the ground beneath it. 30. The bicentennial celebration of 1976. 200 years after declaring independence, America threw itself a party. The bicentennial of 1976 wasn't just fireworks and parades, it was a national soul-searching. After years of war, scandal, and social upheaval, the country needed to remember who it was. Cities draped themselves in red, white, and blue. Tall ships sailed into New York Harbor, and bands played anthems that echoed from coast to coast. But beneath the celebration was reflection. What did 2 centuries of freedom really mean? Had the nation lived up to its promise, families gathered around televisions to watch parades, and presidents feeling a rare sense of unity? It wasn't blind pride, it was gratitude mixed with humility. America had stumbled, yet endured. The bicentennial became more than an anniversary, it was a pause, a collective breath. A chance to look back with honesty and forward with hope. In the glow of those fireworks, the 1970s closed like a chapter, leaving behind a nation older, wiser, and still reaching for its better self. Looking back, the 1970s weren't just a decade, they were a feeling. A time when laughter echoed from backyard cookouts, when polyester shimmered under disco lights, and even the smallest things like a pet rock could make us believe in magic. Those days may be gone, but the spirit still lives in every memory we share. If these stories brought a smile or stirred something deep inside, you hit like, subscribe, and help keep America's golden memories alive for generations to come.